and tag at Global Genes for a chance to be featured in our social media channels. The official event hashtag is hashtag 2020 Global or GG Summit. That's hashtag 2020 GG Summit. Finally, we do encourage you all to participate as active listeners and take advantage of this opportunity to hear from leaders and experts and ask questions. This program is your time to learn and find answers on critical challenges in rare disease research. As we get started though, I want to add a few personal comments about this session. And for full disclosure, I have to admit that when we discussed having this session with Debra and Jason, I wanted to moderate. As a rare mom myself, I might have used my rare mom superpowers to bully my way in even. This duo is incredibly special and has made such a personal impact on me and touched my heart and inspired my mind. They have courage, trust, and are filled with hope. As importantly, they are truly, truly making a difference. They're heroes of mine, and I know after hearing their story today, they'll be heroes of yours too. Tonight, we are exceptionally grateful to have Dr. Jason Sicklick, Professor of Surgery, Executive Vice Chair of Research, co-leader of the Sarcoma Disease Team, and Deputy Director, Biorepository and Tissue Technology Shared Resource at UC San Diego School of Medicine, Division of Surgical Oncology at Moores Cancer Center. And that was a mouthful, but I think it's also important to add that Jason, Dr. Sicklick, is a highly skilled surgeon. He's a brilliant translational scientist and an incredibly compassionate clinician that never gives up. He and his clinical and his research teams work tirelessly to drive research and provide families with the gift of time with their loved ones. We are absolutely also going to hear from Mama Tiger extraordinaire, GIST cancer advocate and leader, Debbie Melikian. Debra is a self-admitted mother on a mission. She raises awareness and financial support for GIST cancer research, particularly research being done by Dr. Sicklick and his team at UCSD. Debra's story is a tough one of endurance and of loss, but also one of incredible strength and hope for future families. Tonight's conversation is about partnerships and collaboration between researchers and advocates. Debra and Jason are an amazing example of such a partnership and show what it takes to make a real difference. I'd like to kick off now by inviting Debra to go first. Debra, if you could share a bit about yourself and your journey and how you met Jason.
Thank you so much, Kimberly, and thank you everybody for being here today. Well, it was in 2014, my son was diagnosed with GIST, presenting with an unexplained gastric bleed initially. My husband was diagnosed the year before in 2013 with another cancer, a related rare cancer called paraganglioma. So they were related cancers. And in an effort to learn more about this rare disease, I reached out to the Life Raft Group, which is a GIST advocacy organization, and also to Global Genes, which specializes in rare diseases. GIST Day of Learning was coming up. It was from the Life Raft groups. I think they do them once a year. Is that right, Jason? Would you say a couple times a year?
Well, one time in each area, roughly. Yeah.
So I attended the GIST Day of Learning in an effort to learn more. And, you know, I felt very out of place. I just didn't know anything about this disease. And I sat down and started writing some questions for some of the, whoever the speakers were that day. And a man came over to me and extended his hand and said, "Hi, I'm Jason, what's your name?" And I told him, and he asked me, "What brings you here?" And all I could muster was, "I have a family member with GIST." That's all I could say. I couldn't say my only child has cancer. So you could see he was very empathetic and felt very bad about it. And we talked a little bit more. And then I said to him, "You know, Jason, if you don't mind me asking, what brings you here?" And I thought, you know, he's a patient, a family member of a patient, you know, mother, father, sister, brother, somebody in his life was there because of GIST. And he said, "Well, I'm one of the speakers today. Would you excuse me?" And he just went up on stage and delivered an amazing presentation on GIST. And I was very much taken by the depth of knowledge that he had in this very rare disease. And I think everybody in the room was. But what impressed me more about him was that After he was finished speaking, I went up to him and I told him that now that I know he's the doctor, I'm going to tell you it's my son, my only child, and he's got this cancer. And we're in between scans. My son had already had one operation in Los Angeles area. And I said we were in between scans. So sure enough, we talked a little bit and I asked a lot of questions, as I usually do. Is that right, Jason? And I asked a lot of questions and he was kind. He gave me advice and just was very, very helpful. I went away from the meeting feeling like a little calmer, a little more informed. And flash forward 3 weeks, my son was in an LA hospital again, requiring a second operation. And this is while my husband was having chemo. So it was a lot going on in our family at the same time. And my son had his operation. Unfortunately, though, the surgeon there was unable to get clear cell margins. So my son had one operation December of 2014, and his second operation was 2015, December, almost 1 year apart. And this disease came back with a vengeance. And not only did it come back with a vengeance, now there was disease left behind, and he had a firestorm of disease. So I was very concerned. I reached out to doctor because I remembered him from this event. He called me back. We talked at length. He gave me guidance and advice, and ultimately we transitioned care down to UC San Diego in January of 2016. And the day that I met Jason at the GIST Day of Learning was the day that changed the course of my son's care and all of our lives forever. And then we were meeting with you. And I remember saying to you, I know there's no cure for this right now. And I think the first question I asked you was, how much money does it take to bring a drug to market? And you explained in very clear terms. And then I asked you, well, how long does this take? And you explained in very clear terms. And I said, we don't have that time. And then I said, I hope you don't mind, I'm going to ask you another question. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical professional. I'm a business person. But most importantly, I'm a mother. And I'm a mother on a mission. And I said, Jason, tell me what you need from me so that I can help you get what you need in order to save my son. And of course, others like him. Tell me what you need and how can I help you get what you need so that you're able to save my son. And he looked at me, and I don't know if anybody ever asked you that question before, but I said, I asked him that. And I could just feel, even as I say it now, I could feel the desperation in my voice because there's no cure. My son's got a firestorm of disease and I'm desperate to find something, anything that will help him. And you mentioned to me, when I asked you, you said, it's about the research, funding the research. And without missing a beat, I said, I can do that. And that was the moment I became a mother on a mission to raise awareness and financial support for GIST cancer research being done by Jason Sicklick at UC San Diego. And that's how we started.
Jason, would you take a moment and share a bit about yourself as well as your thoughts on meeting Debra?
Yeah. Whenever Debbie and I tell this story, she's so great at telling that part. I never want to interrupt because she really does a good job telling how sort of we first met. You know, our relationship has really grown over time. You know, I'm a physician, I'm a surgeon. I've been here at UC San Diego for 10 years now in practice after my training. And, you know, I'm used to taking care of patients, I'm used to interacting with families, but, you know, you don't normally develop a relationship with a family member or patients the way I have with Debbie over these years. And it's obviously now several years later that we've developed this. And, you know, my clinical practice is sort of based around GIST. As you mentioned in my titles, I see sarcomas, and GIST is a type of sarcoma. Sarcomas are diseases that arise from, or cancers that arise from nerves, muscle, fat, bone. And so GIST, which is a tumor type that arises from the pacemaker cells of our intestine, meaning the cells, just like we have cells in our heart that tell our heart to beat, we've got cells in our intestines that tell our intestines to peristalse. So you can eat a meal and not have to think about, make my food go down. It just happens automatically. Those are the cells that give rise to GIST. And there's just as funny in that it set the precedent about 20 years ago, in the late 90s, for this whole revolution of precision medicine. And at the time, there was some discoveries that mutations in genes were the drivers of GIST. And it so turned out that an investigator at the time, Brian Drucker, who was a graduate of UCSD School of Medicine, was up at OHSU, Oregon Health Sciences University, and was studying this drug. And it turned out that that drug targeted this gene KIT that was driving GIST. And at the time, basically, it was right around the same time they had developed a cell line, and that cell line had a KIT mutation, and they said, drug, mutation, boom, does it work? Yes. And rapidly went from no way to study that disease, and really didn't even really have a name at the time. It was sort of called all these different things and nobody knew really what it was, to within about 3-4 years, it was FDA approved after the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials. So, that was like a revolution. But what happened at the time, though, is that, everybody said, threw their hands up and was like, high-fiving that we cured this disease. And then over the next several years, come to realize that there's all these subsets of the disease that are not treated by it. And what evolved over the next several years is that there were some rarer subsets that were not sensitive to any of the drugs that were sort of evolving, of the first line drug, then the second line drug, and then the third line drug that eventually got FDA approved, after several big trials. But there was this population of patients, this rare population of patients where, in general, GIST occurs in about 4,000 to 6,000 people per year in the US. So somewhere on about, if you do the math, it's about 7 patients per million or so will develop this. It's pretty rare. But there's a subset that only represents about 10%. That's the 10% where none of these drugs were really working. You might every once in a while get lucky, and you might have like the anecdotal one-off where you said, hey, it worked great, and that was like the rare experience. But in general, it wasn't. And so, that's where Debbie and her son and her husband, come in, because at the time, and she said to me, what can we do? Well, we were in a little bit of a rock and a hard place, in that we had all these other drugs. We knew they didn't work. We had no, as I went back to before, the original discovery of the drug that worked, and they put it on a cell line, and lo and behold, it was there. We had no cell lines. We had no way to culture these cells in a petri dish to be able to study drugs. And it was the first thought I had in my mind when she asked me this question is we need to figure out a way to develop models or develop ways to culture these cells so that we can do that. And because we didn't have any other way. And it was that really was the start of the partnership between us. And, as luck would have it, we raised some funds, and I hired somebody in the lab. And then one of the first things that person set out to do was to try to develop cell lines. And I had never, at that point, I knew a lot about GIST, but we hadn't been studying this subtype in my laboratory because there was no way to study it. And, I didn't have any money to study it. There had been some attempts by other groups in the past to try to do it, but those had all sort of unfortunately not gone too far. Lots of money was spent, but not a lot of progress was made. And part of it's, right time, right person, right luck, everything, all the stars aligned. And this a scientist by the name of Debra was hired. Somehow Myra had the magic touch and figured out how to grow these cells. And we went from no cell lines to, we have 3 cell lines, to doing drug screening across campus at one of our partner institutions in San Diego, and identified a handful of drugs that might work. And, you know, the sort of things just started exploding from there in terms of kind of next steps. And it just started snowballing. And so it was, you know, not by my intention to study that, because I didn't have, you know, access to reagents nor funds for it. But it was through Debbie that this whole movement got started and allowed us to start pushing this forward. And it was really, I think, part of that momentum nationally at the time of Debbie, and then, you know, a few other advocates around the country that really kind of suddenly started accelerating this field in the last just several years, really.
It's incredible. I love this. It's clearly you were meant to connect, you know, destined to be partners in driving this research forward. So meaningful. You know, let's talk about the secret partnership sauce. You know, how do you choose the right partner? How do you evaluate if someone will be a good partner? You clearly, you know, you found it here. What advice would you give? Let's start with Debra.
Well, I think that's a great question. And I think that, you know, it can mean different things to different people. For me, one of the first things is to see who is studying the disease. And, you know, with us, it just happened that I asked him straight out, what do you need and how can I help you get it to save my child? But he was very receptive to that. I think one of the things that's important is trust, first of all, you know, to find someone that you trust and there's a mutual trust. That's very important. And also mutual respect of one another. I also think that having, I guess you would call it a shared vision and shared values. The other thing is important is communication, being able to communicate clearly and often about whatever is happening. And I think ultimately being united in the goal, and we are very clearly united in our mutual goal of funding and finding a cure for this cancer. That's, you know, that's very, very important. I also think too that, you know, when you're talking to people, find the researchers who have written papers on the disease that you're trying to get more information on. Find the researchers, reach out to them, talk to them. Do they take the time to answer your questions? Do they call you back? Do they email you back? Do they express interest, you know, in wanting to talk with you and work with you?
Absolutely. You know, Debbie, I'm going to ask you before we go to Jason, you know, what guidance or advice do you have for us in approaching a researcher? So what questions do you ask? Do you have a? Oh,
thank you. Yes. You know, first I would do the research myself and find out who the leaders in that particular disease are. And then a question I would ask, actually there's several questions. The first question I would ask them is, what are you doing in research today and what can you share with me now? The other question I would ask is, and what is your biggest hurdle or challenge in moving the research forward? And the third question I would ask is, and how can we as advocates from around the world, all of us here together, or whoever is speaking to the researcher, how can we help you get what you need so that you're able to move the research forward? And there might be answers like we need funding, might be we need tissue, then we might need this or that. I mean, to elicit those responses and then be able to move forward from there. I think those are important things.
Right. Awesome. Jason, secret partnership sauce?
You know, this is going to sound corny, but it's sort of like finding a spouse. you not everybody's right. Not every relationship's going to be right. And, sometimes it's just luck that you kind of bump into that right person or you make that connection. I do, think those are all, all kidding aside. I mean, I think it's legitimately true though. Like from day one, I mean, and not every physician is going to be this way. Not every researcher is going to be this way. Like, I'm very open and willing to communicate. I think from day one, I gave Debbie my cell phone and said, call me, if you've got questions, or send me a text, or what, I'm open to communicating. I think just leaving those lines of communication available is probably a first step. And as somebody that on, my side of the relationship is very hard to get access to, is not responsive, is, whether it be email, text, phone call. I mean, it's not somebody where you're going to probably have a long lasting relationship with, where you're going to move things forward. Debbie and I are we're very honest with each other. And when you listed off all these other things I got going on, and, administrative responsibilities, when I'm up here with all this other stuff and I can't, do something that, she emails me and says, hey, what do you think about this idea or this grant? She knows that, I'll get to that when I can get to it. And, especially as time has gone on now. And that, sometimes she knows when I'll tell her I can or I cannot do that. That's, and so we're very open with each other and honest with each other in terms of, the relationship. I think the shared goals that we have, as she said, we've both explicitly and implicitly, we've sort of developed those together. And, we spent a lot of time talking about, like, not only like, what is the next step, how are we going to move the research forward, but we're constantly talking, we've talked about, like, how do we fundraise? How do we, is this the right time to fundraise? Is, in the setting of COVID, in the setting of, other things that are going on in the, just in the world right now, other things that are going on in terms of just times of the year. And, and so we've sort of, we have those open lines of communication as well, because it's an important part of trying to raise the funds, trying to raise the awareness, but not overdoing it, in a way that would be off-putting to people either, as we work together. And so I think it's it can be challenging, but I think being available to each other and working together closely, and but also being honest with each other about what's feasible, what's not feasible, I think are all critical parts of this puzzle.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes, building blocks to a good relationship, right?
So too, I think if I can just jump in for just a moment, also to setting expectations, keep managing expectations is also something that's important. I want a cure now. That is something that every parent wants for their child, is that they want a cure now. So, we've had to have discussions about that too, and how we move forward together. We both value the partnership so much, and I know that I could not do what I do were it not for Jason Sicklick.
It goes both ways.
Thank you.
I think the other thing to think about, Debbie said, who's publishing the papers on it, who's the experts in it. There's, like at the time, admittedly, I was not studying SDH or, this specific subset. I was studying the disease, but not this kind of very thin slice of that pie at the time. But had the other knowledge bases to extrapolate it over. So I think that's, something where you won't necessarily find the perfect person, but somebody that maybe has the knowledge that can then get moved over to something else as something to look for, so you're not just, going, at the one target because that's the only person, there. And sometimes, honestly, the other thing to think about as you're looking for partners, if a patient advocate's looking for partners, is looking for somebody who's maybe there, but also maybe on the fringe a little bit and is thinking outside the box a little bit, because If the people that are, you know, right at the forefront are at the forefront, but still the field's not moving ahead, maybe there's a reason behind that. Maybe that sort of outside the box thinking is maybe, you know, part of the secret sauce of maybe moving that field forward a little bit more. And so I think that's, you know, it's not always the case, but, you know, but sometimes bringing in people that are on the outside that they can kind of look at a different angle, you know, is sometimes an important part of moving the science forward, you know, or the individuals that are able to build a network of their own, you know, a scientific network, or have a scientific network where, you know, they are, you know, very receptive to collaborators, and it's not just, you know, one lab, one person. I joke that, you know, I'm very also, besides having a relationship with Debbie, I'm also very promiscuous in my collaborations, because I'll work with anybody as long as it's a great collaboration on the scientific side amongst collaborators, because, you know, sometimes you're surprised, you know, who might be a great setup to work with to then build up. And, you know, one of the things that happened for us was, or, you know, on the scientific side was, I was giving a talk at our cancer center a couple of years ago, telling the story of how we had started doing this, and we had made the cells, and we had identified, you know, a potential drug, and we had treated a couple of patients at the time, and, you know, including Debbie's son, and we had seen a few responses, but we were still really kind of in our infancy of trying to understand the biology of these tumors. And a very astute bioengineer that was in the crowd, who is out here on campus at UC San Diego, whose laboratory is maybe, I don't know, it's across the freeway and probably another, you know, quarter-mile walk away, was investigating similar concepts, but in a different disease. And we sat down, had lunch, and within a couple of weeks, I had cells in his lab. We were, you know, doing some additional investigations, and 2 months later, we submitted a grant to the FDA, and basically that got funded, and that's rolled into opening a clinical trial and studying the basic biology, and this sort of snowball of the money that Debbie, you know, started raising early on, and then snowballed into an FDA grant, and then snowballed into another grant through where one of our other patient mothers, the mother on a mission #2, Michelle McClay, connected me with a foundation in Los Angeles, you know, called Phase 1 Foundation, who is now helping us fund the trial, not only here in San Diego, but to move that trial nationally. And so, you know, some of it's, you know, again, it was a situation of luck, right place, right time, but then also being open to developing, you know, new collaborations. And so, you know, and I just had a 30-minute call with that person, Christian Metallo, today, you know, about what are the next experiments.
Whatever else is playing in the background.
Yes, so I need to be on mute. All right, awesome. So, thank you for that. And I can't get the promiscuous collaborations out of my head now. I'm going to remember, that'll be a title for a session next year. That's perfect. It's so important. I love it. Work with anyone who has creative ideas. It's brilliant. Debra, I'm gonna turn here to you. What tools and strategies can advocates use to approach researchers in the right way? What are your thoughts there?
Tools and strategies. I think first and foremost, look to what they want, what the advocates want to accomplish, and then reach out to the researchers. It's a very hard thing. It's hard to put into the words, but to see a loved one, a son, a daughter, sister, brother, parent, partner, wife, son, husband, anybody, to see a loved one go through everything with rare diseases and all of the sea of scans and complex operations with long recoveries and, you know, medications with side effects. It's a very hard thing to be in that mode and then think to shift to, who can I talk to? What can I do? And early on, I realized when my husband was diagnosed in 2013 and my son, my only child, in 2014, I thought I could cry and crumble, which is what I felt like doing, or I could be strong and strategic. And immediately I made that very conscious effort to be strong and strategic because that was the way I could help my family the most. And in doing so, it's the reaching out to the researchers. I'm very fortunate that, you know, to be working with Jason, but for others who are looking to that, I think the tools would be also knowing who the researchers are. And Jason, I love the comments you made about looking to the researchers that may or may not be the exact disease, but maybe doing something a little bit different, or, you know, potentially something that could be the disease that you're looking to. I also think that you need to look within yourself. And I think people have time, talent, or treasure. Any combination of those can help someone move research forward. So look at yourself and think, well, what can I do to help him or her? How can I help? What can I do? And look to what your strong suits are. I know mine. I also know what I'm not good at too. So I'm very, very much one who does business development, sales, marketing, and special events, PR, those kinds of things. But if you ask me to sit down and do paperwork for 8 hours in a room, I probably would do it, but I wouldn't like it. So I think that if you find something that you enjoy and you're good at, and you can do that and translate that into helping a researcher if they have something that they need something. Maybe someone's excellent in social media. Maybe they can help with social media. Maybe someone is a big event planner professionally. They can host events. I mean, they can raise funds that way. Maybe someone can do something else, you know, write press releases or reach out to the media. You know, everybody can do something. And to find what you can do, and then ask, you know, find the researchers and ask them, what do they need? And how can you help them?
I love that.
And
I know you shared with me, you'll never be a surgeon, but there are lots of things that you can do. I just love it. Love it.
right.
And this is not a short game. You know, this is the long game, and you know it's hard. It's hard for all of us. You know, we all want to just like make the discovery and, you know, keep moving and pushing forward very quickly, but you know, we all have to recognize that it takes a while, and even if you're moving as fast as you can, you still have to do it, validate it, confirm via another method that what you're thinking is right before you just, you know, say we've figured it out, you know, and then be understanding of the fact that, let's say you find that amazing drug, it's, you know, but then you got to think about, you got to recognize this is probably not going to work forever in some situations. Is, you know, we got to already be thinking about what are the next steps down the line, and being, you know, having that, you know, as part of what we're accounting for. And, you know, it takes some grit, it takes some perseverance, you know, on everybody's part, you know, to keep pushing that forward. And so it's, you know, those are sort of intangible things, but also things that you can kind of start, you know, getting a sense of as you identify somebody to work with. Is this somebody that's going to be here for just, you know, raise, you know, for, you know, as a physician, are they going to be somebody that I want to work with and they'll raise a little bit of money and then they're going to disappear, you know, or is this somebody that's going to just keep sticking at, you know, with it, and we're going to, you know, we're building a relationship that's going to be ongoing, and, you know, and those are probably the best long-term relationships that you can have.
Yeah, playing on that, actually, Jason, what can researchers do to, you know, physician researchers do to better work with advocates? You know, how can researchers be more open and, you know, welcoming of patient advocates? What are your thoughts there?
You know, it's a great question. It's a hard question to answer because there's so many possibilities. I mean, you know, whether it's, you know, some of it's just going to be some people's, you know, you're going to have some researchers who are, you know, sort of open and very willing, you know, to listen and learn, and, you know, and sort of that sense that they know stuff, but they don't know everything, to the other end of the spectrum of the individuals who, you know, unfortunately know everything or think they know everything, and that nobody can teach them anything. And I mean, you know, I'm very busy in my life between, you know, my clinical stuff and my research and clinical trials and in administrative roles. And Debbie sends me, emails with like articles sometimes. And it's like, what do you think of this? Or, and it's sometimes like, I don't have the time to go search that paper. And so, being, open to doing that, or saying, hey, let me have somebody in the lab take a look at this and read through it in more detail than, and we can talk about it. And so I think, that's what you're going to look for. That sort of comes down to the personality of the individuals. And maybe, with time and generational changes, that's probably changing as sort of attitudes in medicine are changing a lot over the last, 10, 20 years. And, and just in society in general is changing. So hopefully that will get better and better with time.
So let's talk about lessons learned. So this partnership that the two of you have has been, so significant, and really could be seen as a model for others, and certainly a poignant relationship partnership. What lessons have you learned along the way that you would want to offer to others out there listening tonight? Jason, why don't you go first? Then Debbie.
I was hoping Debbie would go first.
I'm gonna go first.
Sure, yeah.
No, go ahead.
Let me go ahead. Okay.
No, you go.
I've learned so much. I've learned so much from Jason first and foremost, and he has been extraordinary. He has welcomed me into his world in a most gracious of ways, and I'm so grateful, so appreciative. I think the lessons learned, and there are probably many, but one of the first things is Jason is a surgeon, he's a scientist, and he's a clinician. So on any given day, he can be in the operating room saving lives, or at his research bench, translating that research into the care of his patients, like my son, Merrick, and others. And I think that's a really important thing. That's, to me, I feel that triple expertise offers us the most hope. And I also think that lessons learned, keep pushing onward. Don't give up. Just keep pushing and keep searching to find something. I think that the lessons learned for us, I think how it happened that we met and continue to work together. I think that lesson learned is, keep on doing that because it's working. Would you say?
I would totally agree. I think the other part of the puzzle, and I would be remiss for not even mentioning this, is that we have several people, like at the university, for instance, in our development office that we work with really closely, and that are, part of this, team between Debbie and myself. Malcolm Asti, who's our head of development here in the Cancer Center, who, I regularly meet with Debbie in combination, and more recently, Alexis Goldring, who's part of the team as well now, and how, the three of us, or the four of us, then ultimately four of us will sit down and strategize, like, what are the, like, how do we keep moving things forward? How do we plan the next, fundraising event? What are we going to do with that? How is it going to be different from the last time we had a fundraiser for this? What are we going to, what can we share that, is new, and what's the progress that's being made? And then adding on to that is, it's been a little bit hard as of recently with COVID, but, is sending, we've had, bringing in donations and having, giving reports to the donors of what, where their money is going. It's great, when you, just more globally, if people are raising, money and trying to push the research ahead, that 100,000, 200,000, 300,000, 400, those are like amazing gifts. But the reality is, who's looked at their credit card bill and gone $20 here, $10 here, $50 here, and all of a sudden you're like, how do we spend a couple $1,000s this month? And you're like, oh my God, you know, but it's just nickel and diming all of a sudden adds up. And so every little dollar counts, you know, raising $20 and then 50 and 20 and 50 and, you know, and $10, it all adds up. Every one of those things helps contribute to buying, you know, an expensive antibody that costs $400, to, you know, buying reagents that cost $100. I mean, yes, I mean, it's amazing when you can get, you know, when you get these big gifts, and that certainly helps really kind of move things forward. But the sustainability of even working, you know, as an advocate to then, you know, push this even in small increments, but constant small increments, I think is another, you know, another fact that's often overlooked in terms of fundraising, you know, because we all want to see that, you know, $1 million check, you know, but.
I think that's it's such an important point. And I think to turn it on its head a little bit, it also, for someone who can't give $100,000, giving 20 sometimes means so much, or $5 for someone who can't give a lot, but feels, you know, really connected and really, really invested and feels like they're helping. So absolutely, I agree. It makes so much impact. There's a question here coming in on the chat, and Debbie, I think this one's for you. Tell us about how this partnership has supported you in helping you to navigate some of the most challenging parts of your journey.
Well, to start, my thought would be the way that Jason has been front and center, present for my son, for my husband, and for me, even now. That's been, you know, that's been something. I think that these are very challenging times. I have lost my husband and my only child in a mere 2+ years. And both fought bravely and in a bittersweet way. My son learned how to fight cancer by watching my husband fight cancer. So the times are difficult, but I remain a mother on a mission to raise awareness and support for just cancer research, because I don't want any other family to have to go through this despair and the destruction that this cancer brings. And having the purpose and the mission to continue that with Jason is vitally important to me. So I hope that answers the question. Is that what I don't see the question on the screen.
Absolutely, from the heart. Thank you, Debra. Let's see. Let me ask this. What does it mean to each of you, to be a good partner? Jason, maybe we'll start with you and then go to Debra.
You know, I think it goes back to the earlier, you know, points we made, you know, about communication, about listening, about, you know, knowing, you know, again, it's like a marriage, you know, it's really, you know, knowing when to push, when to pull, and, you know, and when, you know, it's the right time to, you know, keep moving on with something. And, you know, I think Debra and I work really well together. I think that, you know, in the situation, I am an open book. I tell her what's going on. I'm totally honest about things. You know, she comes to my lab meeting every week. And, you know, when she can make it, she does. And when she can't, she doesn't. But she also is, you know, there to listen. You know, if there's something that she can add, she will. But, you know, if we're having a discussion where she doesn't understand everything, you know, she'll either email me later or she'll go read about it herself, you know, so that we can kind of keep our agenda moving along, and that, you know, we're continuing to talk science and talk, you know, at, you know, a technical level, and and so that's, I think, another, important factor of, keeping together, but yet, understanding what the boundaries are. It can be, we have a unique relationship in that I also took care of her family as well. And so, it does, changes things a little bit in that, I know her from from the science side, from the clinical side, from, all the ups and downs, and from, from literally from the inside out, and so, it does, create, unique bonds. You can see, sometimes when we give talks, she calls me Dr. Sicklick, and I'm like, stop calling me Dr. Sicklick. We know each other well enough. I'm Jason. It's fine. But behind the closed doors, it's always Jason. She knows my kids. She knows my wife, etc. So, it's more than just patient, family, doctor relationship at this point. And I think you got to be willing to break down those barriers. Otherwise you're not going to have the same kind of relationship where, things are open as they are.
Great advice. Great advice. Thank you. Debra, what does it mean to you to be a good partner?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yes. What does it mean to you to be a good partner?
It means everything to me to be a good partner and to have that opportunity to partner with Jason Sicklick and be able to help move research forward. I'll ask him from time to time, what do you need from me? Is there anything I can do for you? How can I help? And there may be things that I can do that I wasn't aware of before, and I can help in any way. It's very important to me. It's vitally important, this partnership. And my hope is that someday soon we will be able to fund and find a cure. And I am fortunate to be able to be partners with him.
I knew you were going to make me cry. How about any last words of wisdom? We're towards the end of our time here. I can't believe it. An hour has almost gone by. We could talk all night. But any last words of wisdom or advice that you'd like to share with the group? Maybe Debra, you want to go first, and then we'll go to Jason.
Jason, do you want to go first? Or you want
I was just looking at one of the questions, and I could answer that. And then, does insurance help pay for these visits with researchers and doctors across the country?
Just
can you hear me?
Yeah. Could you repeat it? Yeah.
Does insurance help pay for any of these visits with researchers and doctors across the country? It doesn't. In terms of seeing a physician, yes, insurance should cover that. Obviously, if it's, within the network of whatever that insurance company is. I think with telemedicine, I think we've seen this massive change in the last 6 months. It's maybe one of the good things that's come out of COVID. Or one of the few good things that's come out of COVID is this rapid explosion of telemedicine, and the fact that, we can see patients, from afar. We can give second opinions from afar. Sometimes when previously somebody could not travel, that's huge. But it also, for rare diseases, when you've only got a handful of people, if that around the United States, let's say, that can, have any expertise in a very rare disease, that having a telemedicine visit now gives you access to that person without having to fly out and see that person. And just like, I've been emailing Kimberly this week, getting her help on trying to connect me with somebody for some very esoteric gene related, disorder that, even the experts haven't even seen, or have, that. But it was through Kimberly that, down this kind of circuitous road over the last week, and probably 4 or 5 emails, we kind of got to the end of the road to the person that potentially would know, and then connect us with the last person. And so I think that, there has been some good that's come out of it. In terms of, not COVID, in terms of, I think advice, I think it's, be open, be honest, be forward thinking, and you know, think outside the box a little bit, I think are sort of my mantras.
Awesome. Think outside the box and promiscuous collaboration. Got it. Debbie, how about you? Last words of wisdom.
Always keep focused on what you're trying to accomplish. Continue to press onward despite the situation at hand. You're fighting for your family, your loved ones. Keep pushing forward. Find the research scientist to partner with and continue to move forward. I'm very grateful for Jason Sicklick and the care that he gave my family, his lab team, and also his clinical team. It took care of my husband and my son. I'm grateful for the care they got all the way around at UC San Diego. And I'm grateful for him opening his arms to me and having me be a partner with him in this amazing, amazing partnership. And thank you for giving me the gift of time, Jason, with my family.
My pleasure.
And we just move forward.
More.
We just move forward one day at a time, as you say.
Yeah.
That's what I would say to everybody.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. So yeah, thank you so much, Debra and Jason, for having this great discussion tonight. And thanks to the audience as well for tuning in and being a part of this evening. I know our audience, Debbie and Jason, absolutely joins me in being so grateful and glad that you have this amazing partnership and you've taught us some things tonight. We're thankful that you've shared your insights. We are grateful for the work that you do and you inspire us every day. So thanks for being amazing to you both. To close out tonight, I do want to encourage everyone to join us tomorrow on Thursday at noon Eastern. We do have sessions starting again. That's 9 Pacific, noon Eastern. For more great virtual discussions at Global Gene Live Unsummit, please join us. And thank you so much this evening. Have a wonderful evening. Take care.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody.
Big hug.
Bye-bye.